At 75, the man who spent half a century defending a single relationship has finally encountered a silence he cannot negotiate away. King Charles III sits in the dim light of the palace chapel, his hands trembling as they press together in a desperate plea for a clarity that refuses to arrive. Outside the stone walls, the British monarchy is not merely facing another scandal, it is navigating a state of financial and emotional warfare that has reshuffled the family's DNA in a single, brutal stroke. The headlines do not whisper of disagreements anymore. They scream of a clean clinical break that has severed the lifeblood of the Queen Consort's world. Prince William has signed the order, and the money that once flowed like a silent river into the accounts of the Shand and Parker Bowles families has officially run dry. The paradox of this moment is as sharp as a guillotine. The woman who survived decades of public hatred to finally wear the crown is now being treated as a financial contagion by her own stepson. Before the first rays of dawn touched the grand windows of the royal estate, a quiet buzz had already turned into thunder among the palace staff. This was not the usual morning gossip about wardrobes or travel schedules. It was the realization that the Prince of Wales had moved from observer to executioner. William did not ask for a review or a committee meeting. He acted with the cold finality of a man who had finally seen enough. In one afternoon, the complex bank transfers and generous maintenance grants that kept Camilla's extended relatives in a state of polished prestige were terminated. To understand why the future king decided to wage war on his father's wife, you have to look at a small, cluttered room in a cozy home in Wiltshire. There Andrew Parker Bowles, the man who was once the other half of the most scandalous marriage in Britain, sat in a worn leather armchair with a digital recorder in his hand. At 84, the veteran soldier decided that his heart had carried the weight of the crown's secrets for too long. He didn't just speak of ancient infidelities or the teenage heartbreaks of the 1970s. He peeled back layers that the palace's image makers had spent 40 years shellacking into a smooth, deceptive surface. His voice, rough with the exhaustion of a long life, confessed that the kingdom was built on a financial delusion. Andrew's recording claimed that Camilla had not merely fallen in love with a prince. She had spent decades constructing a hidden empire of secret trusts and offshore companies. He described a maze of shadowy charities that functioned more like private vaults for her closest allies than instruments of public good. This was the shattering of the golden illusion of the reformed queen, the idea that she was a woman who only ever wanted to serve the man she loved. In the recording, she is painted as a master of the long game, a woman who learned to twist every aristocratic rule to her advantage while the world was busy looking at her jewelry. Within hours, the tape leaked, and the fragile peace the Windsors had fought to maintain was incinerated. The rise of the golden couple of the 1970s was always more of a chess game than a fairy tale. In the late 1960s, the lush green polo fields of England served as the staging ground for a bond that would eventually nearly sink the monarchy. Andrew was the dashing cavalry officer with the easy smile, and Camilla was the magnetic force who smoked with defiance and laughed louder than etiquette allowed. They were the faces of a modern rebellious aristocracy, floating above the rigid expectations of their parents. But behind the doors of Bowlerhyde Manor, the glamour was a mask for a different kind of hunger. Their marriage was a partnership of status and desire, a union where love was often secondary to the pursuit of influence and the proximity to power. Everything shifted the moment Prince Charles returned from his naval duty, and Camilla's gaze drifted toward the throne. Andrew would later admit that he too had been unfaithful, but he claimed Camilla's betrayals were a clinical part of a broader strategy to ensure she was never again treated as disposable. He watched her slip away like sand through open hands, pricked by 1,000 small acts of distance. The late-night phone calls, the trips to London that never seemed to end, the whispers he was never meant to hear. By the early 1980s, he realized he was no longer a husband. He was a stepping stone. While he wrestled with that humiliation, Camilla was quietly laying the foundation for a financial safety net that would remain invisible for 30 years. The discovery that triggered Prince William's fury was a thick audit report that landed on his desk like a lead weight. As he flipped through the pages, the figures revealed that millions of pounds had been systematically diverted from the royal treasury to support the lifestyles of the Queen's extended family. It was a discovery that sparked a firestorm inside the palace, pitting advisors who urged familial mercy against those who saw a decade of quiet corruption. William hardly ate or slept for 3 days, feeling the weight of his mother's portrait watching him from the wall of her old study. The air in the hallway was thick with the scent of old books and the cold reality of a trust that had been utterly betrayed. It was Catherine who provided the final push, her voice steady despite her own battle with illness. She looked into William's eyes and told him to do nothing in anger but to refuse to do nothing at all. That sentence struck a chord of duty that was louder than any fatherly loyalty. William entered Diana's study after midnight, a room that still feels like the sanctuary of the woman the palace once tried to erase. He sat at the heavy wooden desk, stared at the official document that would bankrupt his stepmother's faction, and signed his name with a single decisive stroke. He didn't just stop the money. He signaled the end of the era of secrets, proving that the crown now belonged to a man who valued truth over comfort. The fallout was a tidal wave that swept Camilla from the public eye almost instantly. She vanished behind the high stone walls of the palace, replaced by a phalanx of sharp-tongued lawyers who fanned out across the media. They issued denials that felt more like threats, hinting at countersuits and the exposure of even deeper palace wounds if the digging continued. Charles was left frozen in the center of an impossible choice, caught between the woman who had stood by him through the Tampon Gate fires and the son who was now defending the honor of the monarchy. The king's public statements of full confidence were seen as a hollow mask, a desperate attempt to hide the fact that his own house was divided against itself. Beyond the gates, the crisis turned the United Kingdom into a sociological battlefield. Loyal monarchists, many of them elderly and weeping, camped outside the palace fences, singing anthems as if they could hold the crumbling tradition together with their voices. But across the street, the anger of the Republican movement had reached a fever pitch, their signs demanding the exposure of the secret trusts and an end to the monarchy of shadows. The trust in the royal family plummeted below 50%, a number that signaled a genuine existential threat to the Windsor line. The firm was no longer a symbol of unity. It was a clinical case study in how a family can be ripped apart by the collision of pride and principle. The memory of 1993's Camilla Gate returned to haunt the current court, reminding the public that this was not the first time a secret recording had devastated the family's image. Back then, a 6-minute chat intercepted by a radio enthusiast turned the future king into a global punchline and shattered the final remnants of his marriage to Diana. It was a scandal that stripped away the illusion of royal perfection, leaving an impression of human frailty that has never truly been forgotten. Now, history was repeating itself, but with a darker financial edge. The Squidgate and Tampongate tapes were about desire. The Parker Bowles recording was about the mechanics of power and the price of a crown that was never supposed to be hers. In Australia and Canada, the scandal became the final catalyst for a move away from the monarchy. Politicians who had once been cautious now called for national votes to break the ties with the British throne once and for all. In the Caribbean, the uproar was the last push toward full independence as nations watched the Windsors fight over millions. While the history of their own colonial suffering remained unaddressed. The global standing of the British monarchy was being dismantled not by a foreign enemy, but by the echoes of a voice from a Wiltshire armchair. The crown was no longer a unifying force, it was a depreciating asset in the eyes of a world that had moved past the need for kings and queens. Inside the palace, the silence is now the loudest thing in the hallways. Charles remains a man of profound pain. A monarch who has realized that the woman he spent a lifetime protecting may have used that protection to build a kingdom of her own. He kneels in the chapel, looking for an answer that would save both his marriage and his legacy. But the silence of the stone is his only companion. William has shown that he is ready to be king, but the cost of his readiness is the total destruction of his father's domestic peace. The prince has chosen the institution over the individual, a decision that mirrors the cold requirements of the crown that he will one day wear. The aftertaste of this financial warfare is a lingering sense of uncertainty about what remains of the royal bond. Camilla has the title, but William has the keys to the treasury, and the power dynamic has shifted forever. The Queen Consort has learned that in the Game of Thrones, your past is never truly buried. It is just waiting for the right digital recorder. She has been rejected by the people, accepted by the king, and now exiled by the heir. It is a journey of incredible resilience and profound calculation that has ended in a house of cedar and shadow where the lights are on, but the heart of the family is gone. As the sun sets over the palace, the question for the nation is whether this break in the armor can ever truly heal. Some see William's stand as the beginning of a more honest modern monarchy, one that is no longer afraid of its own shadows or the financial webs of its members. Others fear it is the slow unraveling of 1,000 years of tradition, a process where the truth is more dangerous than the lie. But one thing is certain, the era of the unlicensed currency of the royal image is over. The money has stopped, the tapes have played, and the House of Windsor is finally standing in the uncompromising light of the 21st century. The story of the royal fallout is a testament to the fact that power and blood are always in conflict, and in the end, the crown always wins. Charles may have prayed for an answer, but the answer was already written in the ink of William's signature. The king has outlasted the scandals of the past, but he may not survive the clarity of the future. As the palace gates close for the night, the world is left with the image of a family that has everything, yet possesses nothing that cannot be taken away by a single honest audit. The legend of the Golden Girl has faded, and the reality of the Iron Prince has taken its place. What do you think of Prince William's decision to cut off the funding to Camilla's family? Was it a necessary act of protection for the crown, or a cold-blooded betrayal of his father's marriage? Do you believe the revelations from Andrew Parker? Bowles have permanently changed the way history will view the Queen Consort. Share your thoughts in the comments below as we continue to pull back the curtain on the real hearts behind the gold. We read every word you write about the legends who shape our world. If this cinematic deep dive into the royal vault moved you, hit like and subscribe to keep these stories of resilience and reality alive. The lights in the chapel have finally dimmed, and the king has returned to his study. The silence of Buckingham Palace is no longer one of tension, but one of absolute terrifying resolution. The transition has begun, not with a coronation, but with an audit and a recording. The monarchy is safe, the future is defined, and the women who fought for its soul have finally found their places on either side of the gate. William is walking forward, the crown is waiting, and the past is finally truly in the dark. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one, as the history of the Windsors continues to unfold. The final truth is brutal. The scandal did not destroy the family overnight, but it revealed how much had already been destroyed before the signature. The financial break was the moment the monarchy stopped trying to heal and started trying to survive the consequences of its own secrets. William did not look triumphant, Harry did not look erased, and Charles did not look at peace. Each of them carried a piece of the same ending into a future where the rules were finally clear. The money was cut, the door was locked, and the monarchy made its choice. The end of the story is the beginning of the myth, and the silence is beautiful. In a town that demands everything, the royal family managed to save its structure at the cost of its heart. The final mark is hit, the pen is down, and the future is being secured in the silence of the state papers. Charles has found his peace in the trust, and William has found his peace in the responsibility. The Windsor dynasty is safe because it finally learned to value the truth over the performance. The Prince of Wales is the final word on the new standard of the crown. Goodbye for now, and remember that even in a palace, the most important work is done without an audience. The red box is shut. The accounts are closed and the future is here.